Network Automation Nerds podcast.
Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and a whole lot more technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, we'll be talking to Matyáš Prokop, Principal Architect at Natilik. I've talked to Matyas on several occasions about his interesting journey in technology, and I'm really excited to talk to him about his personal stories and some of the unique challenges and interesting stuff for working for a high-profile value-added reseller. So let's dive right in. Matyas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. So you're based out of UK. So I'm across the Atlantic Ocean in the US. In fact, I'm on the other side of the US. So it's good to be virtually seeing you again.
Yeah, it must be like a morning time for you, right?
It is morning time, but I'm a morning person, so I've been up for a couple hours now. So
Right.
Hopefully
Great.
I'm not like sleepy and
No,
still being awake. So Matyas, first of all, I know I'm not saying your name as good as it should be. So can you just pronounce it correctly for us?
I can try. Every time people ask me, how my name is pronounced, I'm like sort of thinking how it's actually pronounced. My name is Matyáš Prokop. That's my name. But please call me Matyas. It's just way easier for everyone. I'm fine with it. I'm not one of those people who complain that people can't pronounce their name. I'm not one of them. I'm fine with it. Don't worry.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So it's like me with my last name. So I pronounce it one way, my family pronounced it one way, but everybody else, as long as I know you're talking to me, you're good.
Exactly. And that's about that pronunciation, right? If even people not pronouncing it right, but they're pronouncing it consistently, the same way, at least,
Right.
they calling you. That's why I find out it's way easier for everyone to call me Matyas, because I know they call me, they call my name. For them, it's easier to pronounce it. So it's just easier for everyone.
That's a good point. So even if you're wrong consistently, you're good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice. I think that applies to so many other aspects of life too.
I think so. Yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I remember when I first arrived in Seattle 12 years ago, they were like, yeah, there was a big fire in downtown Seattle. And instead of rebuilding, they just decided to cover everything up and build on top of it.
Right.
So if you've ever been to Seattle, it's so steep and it's 45-degree angle and your car will have a hard time going up and down. And then other parts would be pretty flat. So it's even if we're wrong, we're just going to go full steam ahead and just beat that wrongness. And eventually, we'll sort it out.
Nice. Next time when I will be in Seattle, you definitely need to take me around.
So Matyas, before we go into, VARs and Cisco networking automation, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get started in tech and what's your journey like up to this point?
Yeah, sure. So where I'm going to start? I think I'm going to start with first computer, probably, like everyone. So there was when I was 10 years old, I think, Windows 3.1. all this kind of stuff. So that's must have been 1996 or something.
Right.
That's where it all started, I think, just playing around with it. Then obviously installing and playing the first new games. I remember for me, what most exciting part was always to setting up that machine and configuring the machine, and then bringing the friends with their computer and just playing the games and configure the network between the computers. That was probably the first time when I was doing something around networks and networking. So that was it, and that sort of kind of grew on me. I remembered the whole elementary school, which in our country is till you were 15. I have my mates, and we were just exchanging games on the floppy disks. Internet arrived into our small town. which was like a big thing. I still remember that was like 1998, I think, or 1999. So we had this one guy in town who was basically like providing the internet, so you could pop in, just visit him, and you would pay the money, and you could go on the internet. So it was brilliant. It was dial up, it was slow, but I still remember like me and my dad when we went and see like at that time there was like the first. What was the rover on a Mars? There was like one of the first ones, like what arrived on Mars, and I remember like it was also the first ones which was like sending the pictures back to the Earth, and they were like publishing all these pictures on the internet. So I still remember like me and my dad, we were like going to this place and just like pay for 60 minutes of the internet, some insane amount of money. And just like going for the pictures, and I was kind of like, wow, this is how it looks on Mars. This is unbelievable.
Not just the money, right? But because these are high resolution pictures, so usually it takes a long time to download from a download link.
Yeah, so you can imagine how long did it take, on the on the dial-up. But that's where it all started, I think. And then the modem. So that was like end of 90s. So we, my parents, pay loads of money to get us the internet in the end of the 90s. And I think that was sort of the breaking point, suddenly like, what it opens for you, the community, the information, all the stuff you can do, is just amazing. So I think, end of the 90s was like sort of the breaking point for me. And then it's all started like, with the business, or like not really the business, but the nonprofit organization, we set it up later. So yeah, that was probably the start for me.
Yeah, no, that is a very interesting start, because I remember me doing the same thing, except it was with like Nintendo. So so it was much less, I guess, much less progressive, I guess. I'm just there playing video games, but you were there looking at pictures from bars and enjoying the internet age. So that's cool. You mentioned, and we talked about this previous in our prior conversations, but you mentioned starting a business, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think like business, it's kind of like a strong word, at least like at the beginning when we were like establishing this, maybe a little bit like overstatement what we were doing at that time. But when I was 15 and I finished my elementary school, I went to the high school, and I remember my like summer holidays between the elementary school and the high school. That's where I don't know how that happened. It was just by some accident. I just had more time, more spare time, and I found out about Linux. I still remember that. I was like 15, and it was like first time. That must have been, beginning of 2000s. So it was like end of 90s, beginning of 2000s. And it was the first time I've like heard about the Linux. So I remember like the first time I've installed Linux, I didn't even know it's like the operating system. I thought it's just some like app you install on your computer. So I just like insert a CD, and there was like my parents' computer. My dad was like doing some work on it, and I basically like reformatted the whole computer. Like everything was gone, and I installed the Linux. And
they must have been happy about that.
Yeah, definitely. Like my father, my parents were cool. Like I still remember that. Like my dad was just like he was like yeah, that's fine. I guess I lost like loads of documents, but can you please at least fix it and put the Windows back on the this computer? So for me, it was kind of like lesson as well how to install the Windows again. So it was like my first experience. But then when I sort of like figure out how to dual boot and having like a Linux and a Windows on the same machine, I started like a little bit going deeper on the Linux machine, on the Linux like the operating system, and then like like when I mentioned the games with my mates, so it was usually like we were playing the like computer games. So we had like a Warcraft 2 at that time and Starcraft and all these kind of like cool games. And we had like once especially during the summer, like once in a week, we always ask our parents to like load the computers and just go to friends' place and we were playing like over the weekend, playing just like computer games and stuff, and it was always good fun. And our parents got a little bit annoyed by that and tired. They were kind of like, we're not going to be taking you like every week, and all this stuff. Just like, guys, like stop doing it every week. Just do it like once in 2 weeks. And then we have this kind of like idea, to play stuff over the wireless. So we that time with some of the other guys, we started to building like the wireless network in our hometown. Mainly like around playing the games. So at that time we didn't have the money. It was like all expensive. We were just the students from the small village. So we like bought the can of like some fruit. I don't know even what was it. You just like eat it, and then you have the empty can. So like you make the antenna from the can. You are like that's like your sort of like endpoint antenna for your house. Then which you have to like change every like 3 weeks because it's just getting rusty, and when it's the antenna rusty, it's obviously not working very well. And then like the omni antennas with like basically cutting the coax cable into pieces and just like putting it all together, and you have basically like a line of the antenna, and you put it into the like a plastic tube, and you put it on the roof, and it's basically your access point. So that's how we started, like in our small town, playing the games, and then one of our friends, he got the internet. He got the ISDN, I think it was at the time.
And, nice.
Yeah, exactly, very fast. So he was like, maybe we can figure out how to share it. So that's where like all these like Linux skills, which I sort of like find out when I was like 15. This was like, I think we started this like when I was 16 or 17. So that's where like all these skills just got handy. So I was kind of like, yeah, sure, I can do Masquerade. I know like how the IP tables works and all this stuff. So we just got some like old computer somewhere, and that was our like first central router through which one we were routing all the traffic for the whole network. And that's how we like established the business. It wasn't really business, and then it's just like start growing. There's been more and more people connecting. More access points in the town. We started to obviously needed more internet, so we just decided that we're going to share the cost for the internet. So we had a like shared connection. It was broadband, so it was like 2002, 2003, I think. And as you can like I don't know like how it was in the US or in China at that time, but like in the Europe, in Czech, in the Central Europe, like post-communist countries, like broadband wasn't available too much till like, let's say 2004, 2005. So when it was like 2002 or 2003, you had the connection, which was like constantly connected into the internet. That was like unbelievable. Like, you didn't pay for the time. You just had it, you just had the internet connectivity. So suddenly like, all these kind of like how-to guides about how to configure Linux, like you had it all the time available. So like you haven't been, it was just great. So yeah, then it was like less playing games and more about like studying and building the network and making sure it works. And it was good fun. And it was at that time it was never business. We never took any money. We haven't been paid. We were just kind of like collecting money from people. It was just like small fee we've asked people to provide, and then we shared the cost for the internet connection. So we were doing it just for fun. We didn't even expect like now when I'm looking at it, it's kind of like that's what defined my career. Like I just like I really do like networking and everything around the automation and all this stuff. At that time, I didn't really think about it this way. I just found like I had good guys around me. It was fun. It was like climbing on the roofs. It was sitting behind the computer in the evenings, and it was just like playing with the Linux. So I didn't really think about it like it should help me at some point, or it's going to be like a great reference for the future. But it showed up in all after all those years. It was a great start. And, not many people were lucky like I was that they could start their career like I was.
Yeah, no, it's completely fascinating to me, right? Like for me, for as you mentioned, right, like the always on broadband was just a game changer. And I would echo that. It's right about the same time, about like 2000 to 2002. You mentioned 2004, so that's right about the same time as broadband took shape in the US. Because I know, because I built the broadband, right? Like that was one
Right.
of the first larger ISP exposure that I had. So I remember at the time, there was an area of the market where people don't want to move to. So it was basically California deserts. I was in the California at the time. I graduated from college like 2 years after, 2 years prior, and I was working for a second tier ISP, but I was doing very much what you were talking about, like not so much ISDN expansion. I don't think ISDN ever took off in the US. It was kind of like a niche market. If you need more than 128K, then you get a couple of B channels, but it was more like T1 installation, and then gradually it was DSL, and then that was right around the time you were describing. So so I raised my hand. I was young, and I didn't have any family or kids for sure. So it was like, okay, I'll move out there to the California desert, and we start building out the cable broadband. So that was an interesting time, and we couldn't roll it out fast enough. People were just like literally. So we will publish these notes where we say, okay, now broadband is available in your area, and then we mail out these flyers and say, hey, you could take up the broadband. And we had take rates for 30-40%, and which is unheard of at the time. Yeah, no, it was interesting time. As you mentioned, this was a game changer, but I am so jealous of you to get started in such an interesting way.
It was great. I have such a good memories, and we're still in touch with the guys. Obviously, like everyone has families now, so I sort of like stepped down from the day-to-day stuff in the company, but still staying in touch and like from time to time giving some like advices and stuff like this. So I'm still involved. It's just not that direct anymore. And they're just like new generation. It's great. Like there's just like next generation of the guys in a younger age who just want to learn the new stuff. But obviously, like it's a slightly different time. I think we were lucky. We were at the beginning of it. So that's what I like. That's why I like those memories. It was like so new. The generation nowadays, they just see it as which is fair enough. Like, they see it as the opportunity on, having something like good on their CV, because that's going to help them like in the future to get a better jobs and stuff, which is like fair enough. It's definitely, it helped me. So why it wouldn't, help other people as well. So yeah, it's been a great journey. I still, have a very fond memories of it. And it created some like great friendships and great memories in my life.
Yeah, I mean, you can't teach large scale, and you can't teach exposure. So it's one thing to read about it in books, but it's another to actually in the trenches where you can read about how the wires were should be connected, but until you need to make that cable yourself to like sort out
exactly
the pins, then
and in our
it
case
becomes real.
in our case it was even more complex because we were starting on a 2.4, and at
Right.
that time 2.4 was quite reliable. So it was like beginning of 2000s. 2.4 was okay. And we were like, I remember, I think the longest path we were shooting was like around 6 or 7 kilometers, which was like insane on a 2.4. Like, you can't, you can't imagine like, you would be doing this like nowadays. It's just, it wouldn't happen. Like, you can barely do it on like, 20 meters in your flat, not even mention like, across the whole, like between the two cities. So the challenge is then just like start growing, like 2.4 start being like widely used. We at some point we were sort of like saying people do not turn on any APs in your home because it's just like creating the interferences. But like obviously this is not sustainable. Like you can't tell people like in the whole town, even though we're a small town, we're like 4,000 people. You can't just tell everyone like do not turn on your APs. So then we started to moving into the 5 gigahertz and more advanced links. Like we were actually building the it wasn't infrared, it wasn't laser, it was like, it was basically maybe it was infrared. Yeah, maybe, I think it was infrared. Yeah, it was the infrared link. So we basically like solder it, we bought like all the components and we were building it. We build the optics, we build the tubes for it, and again, amazing. When would you ever in your life build like optic link? When would you do it? At that time we were just students. We had a time, we really loved what we were doing. So we were kind of like, and we had some money, and it wasn't too much money. So we didn't have a feeling we're like throwing out the money for like nothing. We said kind of
so it wasn't like Series A funding or VC backed.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It was like really like, I can imagine now it could be like few hundred pounds for paying all these components, and then it was like basically weeks of like getting it working, and then I remember we had the optic links. I have still somewhere the pictures when we were like testing it. It didn't work very well because we're like our town is like on top of the hill, and we have very foggy autumns and springs, like very, very foggy. Usually like driving into our town and you're good, and then you like start going up into the hill, and it's suddenly like it's like you can't see even like on the 5 meters. So obviously that for the optics, that's not very good. So at the end, like it didn't work very well, but again, great experience, great fun.
Yeah, wireless is always tricky. I remember, so when I was working on the broadband network, it was a hybrid network, but we were using licensed spectrum, but we were enclosing it into a closed system, so that was okay. But there are guys, techs, whose part of their job is actually to go out and measure if there was any signal leak, because if there was any kind of signal leak and it overlaps with, say, the police or the paramedics spectrum, then that's all hands on deck, right? You gotta go find that leak and then stop it immediately. Like, doesn't matter what you're on, you're just going to go. So it's always very tricky for me, and I'm quite scared of it, right? Like I don't understand like the curvature of the earth, or like when birds fly by or so. So I don't have too much exposure to it, but it sounded like you guys were just, at a young age, you guys were experimenting and you guys were providing a service, the useful service for your community. So that felt good and propel you to prolong your interest in the field.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that community, that's probably the better word to use for this. For what we were doing, we were really always the community, and we were making sure that everyone knows it. So there has been sometimes people who were like complaining about like the internet doesn't work how it should be. Fix it. And we were like, guys, like we're on a high school, we're students, like we will fix it like when we will get home. You're paying like very, and we usually it was like fair argument, like because like we told them like, look, you're paying such like small money, like it maybe doesn't work in the morning, but in the afternoon we will fix it. So just like hold on. So people like people starting to understand that as well, and then I think what some of the people from the community did was great as well. We obviously starting to bring in people who haven't been like geeks like us. So they've seen that community from like a different perspective. So it actually started becoming more of like a platform how to build a community in our town, which was like amazing, to see that suddenly, because we had a funds, we had a money, and we were like very precious about that money. Like we were really spending it where it was needed always.
Right.
And we were like fully transparent, so everyone could see like where the money goes from the community. But people sometimes had an ideas about like what if we gonna like organize some concert. So we were organizing the concert, which was like this kind of like a popular band at that time in our country, and basically the whole like highway collapsed because there's been like so many people. We were basically saying like we were organized the gig and it's gonna be for free for everyone, like anyone can come, and we didn't expect that when we will do it. Basically half of the Prague will arrive. So there's been suddenly like, influx of like people driving from Prague to our like small town. So the police wasn't very happy. Police was basically saying like, look guys, it's such a great idea, but next time probably you should tell us so we're ready for this. So it was like, we were helping to funding the hockey study and things like this in our town. So, loads of like great things came out of the community, not just the internet, and not just like, giving that sort of the freedom to access the information, which was important, I think. And that's what we were trying to provide to people in our town, but also like, building something in our town and helping to improve that city. Or town. It's not a city. It's a town.
Yeah.
So it was great, and you suddenly, it sort of like expanded you to sort of like what is actually possible, and how this sort of community can grow, and what challenges it has. So it was a great lesson, great experience for life.
Yeah, I would agree. It was just kind of funny. It's like, hey guys, I need a hall pass to go to the bathroom, right? Like, you expect me to go home and fix the internet for you?
Yeah.
There's no ticketing system. There's no like, rolling the truck tag.
Yeah.
It was just me and my friends. So so that's a great story. I mean, every time I could tell people about it, I would totally encourage people to hear that story, because it signifies such a empowerment, right? Like in the microcosm, it's like, that's what technology, or that's what knowledge enabled you to do at such a young age. And you feel such an empowerment that it just like, there's nothing compared to that. But yeah,
exactly. No, I was about to say, like, it's I totally agree, and it's for like for the future in my life, it was like very important memories, like the sort of kind of like moments when you're like pushing through and something doesn't work, and I think what I've learned in those, it was always kind of like, if you're pushing hard, you just like, it's going to work at some point. You just need to push it through, and that's what I learned. There's been obviously like loads of like challenges and hard work we've done, but I think at that age you just sort of kind of like don't really realize it. And if you learn that in that age, it's way easier to find those skills, when you are like older. I don't want to say like, I'm old, not at all, but when you sort of like, older, and that's when those skills like are getting handy, and that mindset.
Yeah, no, I'm old. You're relatively young.
Oh man, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So from there, you so obviously you have to get a real job. That was a community. It paid for the concert, it paid for all the other stuff, but it wasn't paying, for your mortgage or whatever future expense you have. So So what happened afterwards?
So afterwards, so when I was in the high school, I was studying high school, which was focused around the computers. That high school was rubbish. I didn't like it at all. It was just I wasn't very,
tell us how you really feel, man.
yeah. So I will say it was just horrible. It was it wasn't definitely great 4 years. I didn't enjoy it.
Okay.
But again, like it was a great lesson for life. That sort of you have to push through. So I had the community back at home. So like in the evenings and long nights, I was working on stuff which I've enjoyed. During the day, I was doing stuff which was kind of like useless, and people were like kind of weird. So it wasn't great 4 years on the high school, but I sort of like made it through very closely. But I did.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at the where I'm going afterwards, and I don't know, like it was always sort of like not really expected in my family. Like my parents never really like pushed me or like tell me like you are going to the uni, but it was always sort of kind of like it was probably expected a little bit. Like it would be like surprising in a family if I would say like I'm not going.
Right.
And I did want to try it, I did want to give it a go. I wasn't, I didn't feel like, I don't want to go, even though I was like 4 years in high school, which I didn't like. But I just like felt like, the uni could be different. So I started into looking, and I did some like tests and all this stuff, and I got accepted into 3 unis, which was quite surprising. So I could like pick and choose.
Nice.
And I chose the one which was the easiest one. It was just kind of like, I felt like, I'm not really I'm not really good student. So I was kind of like, why pretend I can go to because I got accepted even into like, more like prestigious one in Prague.
Right.
But I was kind of like, I don't have to like, talk to myself, like, saying like, you're a great student, you're going to do it, when I know I'm not going to make it. So I've decided for like the easiest way and went to this uni in a town which is like probably third size, maybe even less. No, it's like 10 size of Prague. So like 100,000 people, very small town in compared to the US, and kind of nice uni in there. So I went there and started studying IT in there, which I think it went better than the high school. I kind of like it. I love the town. I love this sort of like, small student town, loads of like fun around. And I met my flatmates, which was like so much fun. They were studying sport. So they were like very different from me. I was doing, which I didn't mention, I was doing athletics the whole high school, and the part of the elementary school as well. So I was doing quite loads of athletics. All at that age, very dedicated for it. I had like usually like 6 days a week training.
Oh, wow.
So I was giving it like, quite loads of time. So when I moved to the uni, I was telling myself I will never ever do any sports again, because it was just too much of the efforts and it was just like too much hard work. So when I moved to the uni, I didn't do any sports for 2 months, but because I was living with the people who were studying sport, and I just started feeling like, I actually need to. I miss sport. I need to do sport. So when I was talking to them, they sort of like brought me into their classes, and I was suddenly studying 2 unis. One was around the IT, and one was like sport university. So I was doing the sport and the IT at the same time. And
Interesting.
and it was amazing. I just loved every single day. It was like, amazing, like, being early in the morning, doing sports, then go in the afternoon and study the IT. This sort of balance, was brilliant. I loved it. And then obviously like parties with all these like crazy sport people. It was just like a different sort of community, which I just loved. And again, like, we're staying all in touch. It's a great friendships I have for my whole life with these guys. So that was pretty much it. And then like, so what did I do? Like, when I was at the uni, I obviously needed money. I'm coming from like very humble and not really poor, but definitely like, low middle class background. So I needed money, and I didn't want to ask my parents for the money because I knew like, they didn't have too much. So I started to looking for a job, and I found a job in an insurance company.
Okay.
As a programmer.
Oh, okay. Even though you were doing networking, but
exactly.
What's the difference?
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, like, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just kind of like, I guess I need a job, and these guys, they like sort of like, hired me. They were like, yeah, you can join us. I didn't have too much of the experience with the programming, but they were kind of like, yeah, you're gonna be fine. So I joined as a programmer. I wasn't definitely a great programmer. I would almost say like, I was very bad programmer. At that time we were like doing applications. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called Lotus Notes.
Yes.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah, for sure.
Horrible.
It was the pre Microsoft Office suite.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So they use something which is called Lotus Scripts.
And
it's just like, it's so painful. Like I don't know what I was thinking. So like I've met my manager like many years, like few years later. When I was like out of that company, and I was just doing like, I think I was at Google at that time. And we went for a beer, and he was telling me, you were one of the worst programmers I've had in a team, and I'm glad you're not a programmer. like I'm glad like in Google you're doing all this cool stuff around the infrastructure and all this stuff, and I'm glad that like you're not the programmer. Was like fair enough. So
No.
yeah, so that was fun. But what I was doing in there was changing slowly. I think it was around the summer holidays, 2005. When my manager, he saw that, I've been really into like Linux and the infrastructure, and I was helping some guys in the office to build a server for storing the code and all this stuff. And he really saw, I'm really enjoying it. And I think I was like a little bit, pushy as well, that that's what I want to do. So he managed to get me the sort of the internship in Prague, in the headquarters of that insurance company. So my whole summer 2005, I was spending basically in Prague working at the headquarters with amazing manager who became my mentor. And he unfortunately passed away 3 months ago. So he was very, very important person in my life, and he sort of like direct me, where to go in my career, because like he saw like, I'm really enjoying it. We were like, he was that kind of guy. I remember like when I saw him first time, we went for a lunch, and he looked really tired, and he was like telling me, but he was still really nice, and he was like asking me what I want to do. And I told him like, look, I'm doing like, in this like service provider, and I really like it, and I love like Linux and networking and all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, I think, I have some work for you. I can find you something. So he wanted me to like install the servers. And I remember at that time, I've never seen like, like a proper server. It was like HP. I don't know what was it. It was like, beast. And he just asked me to install the Linux on it. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, it was just like simple, like installing Linux on this. It was like, for me, I still remember that. I saw it. And then, we started to working together. So he's been, very helpful then afterwards, because I've decided in 2007 to move to Iceland and study in Iceland.
Okay.
And that was sort of like, for me, break from the IT. I just felt like, I need to try something new, something like, which is like outside of my comfort zone. So I've decided to go to Iceland. I got the offer from like EU to basically, to be fair, that's when I found out. It was the first time when I found out that the community which we've built was probably something like very unique, because they've asked me for like this motivation letter.
Yeah.
And, and when you're like 19 years old student, you basically need to write like, they're not expecting you. You're going to be like, you will tell them like, I've been working on this and that. So they just ask you like, why do you want to go to Iceland? What have you been up to? What have you been doing at the uni? What have you been doing in your life, in your past 18 years? So I told them like, I'm studying to unis. I'm studying sport and EIT. I really do like sport, but I really do like IT as well. We have this community. We have this small company in my hometown, and I just love playing with Linux and everything around the networking. And that's essentially what I told them. And in a month, I got a letter, and they were like, "Yeah, you're going to Iceland. We're happy to give you the grant. You have a big potential. Just go for it." And I was like, "Okay, great. I didn't expect I'm going, but fair enough." So they basically sent me the letter. It was 2007. I think it was the September.
Yeah.
And I basically said to my parents, like, I'm going to Iceland. And they were like, oh, okay. And when you're going? I was like, yeah, I guess like in 2 weeks. And I remember like, my parents were like, for how long? I was like, yeah, I think like for a year. And they were like, oh, okay.
Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I just sent that letter. I don't think like I've even said to my parents, to be fair.
Right.
Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I can't remember. But they were obviously like, thrilled. They were really happy for me to go. So like we bought the flight tickets. That was my first time I was flying. So it was like everything was like kind of big for me to do. So and like I was flying through Frankfurt, via Frankfurt, So like, I was changing the flights. Like at that time, for me, it was like, what is it like changing flights? Like, how do you change flights? How does it
Right.
work? Like,
Right. Do like two flights hook up together so you just hop
exactly.
on?
Do you
Yeah.
like, hop off on the runway and just like go into the next plane? How does it
like
work?
the president, you mean, or the prime minister, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's how it worked in the TV, right? Like that's what it was
Yeah.
in the TV. So
Exactly.
and at that time I didn't speak English at all. Like, there was one thing which I found out when I landed in Keflavik. Like some guy starting to talk to me. I think it was somebody from customs starting to talk to me in English, and I was like, shit, I don't speak English actually. Like, how am I gonna like, work this one out? So I had to like, start like learning how to speak English and all this stuff. And so Iceland was like break. It was like break from the IT. And I kind of like it. I sort of like accepted it that, I'm breaking up with the IT for a while, and let's see, if I will go back. And then things just went like, super fast. It was 2007. I was working as a ski instructor in Iceland. Meanwhile, I was studying because I needed some extra money. It was 2008 when the financial crisis came in. So basically, from over the night, Iceland was like the hardest hit country in the world. So which was, again, like great experience. We suddenly, basically everyone lost the money over the night in that country. So like suddenly, like, you didn't have the money to pay the bills and stuff. And you were like, okay, what am I doing in here then? Like, you lost the job, basically everything crashed. Everything was gone.
Right.
So I was trying to like figure out what to next, and then I went to Hull, to the UK, and studying business. And again, there was like another year break from the IT, and then when I was been finished with the undergraduate, I moved to Birmingham where I was studying the masters, and there was IT stuff, where I sort of said like I want to go back to IT. So Birmingham was like starting point for me. I think that's when I took like IT more seriously. So after I finished the Birmingham, I went back to Czech and started working in IBM, which was quite interesting. We were like sort of like that VAR part of the IBM. So we were like professional services part of the IBM.
Right. Is that when IBM was? So IBM. Sorry to cut you off, but I think there was a time when IBM was, like mainframes, the enterprise, the big blue sort of stuff, but they quickly transitioned into more of a professional services that was really bringing consulting. Is that kind of matches what your role was at the time?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, junior network engineer. I joined the team, where we're CCIEs and really smart people. Again, like, my manager at that time, great guy. We're still in touch. Great friendship with him. So he was basically he took me under his wings. I still remember like interview with him. He was like, "Do you know what is OSPF?" I was like, "Yeah." And so what are you doing outside of the IT? So I told him about like studying sports and being the ski instructor. Yeah, and climbing. And he was like, "Okay, I think I like you. You're hired." And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." And we were talking about it a few years later, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm never interested like in people like technical skills. Like if somebody is like so active as you are, he can learn that or she can learn that. Like it like everything is changing so quickly. You have to learn all the time anyway. And if you don't, like what's the point?" So like he was always saying like for me it's way more important somebody who's like hungry to learn and hungry to like do stuff and not just like sitting at home and just like watching the TV. So. Yeah,
that's not you at all, man.
I hope
somebody sitting at home and
not probably not. Yeah. Like my partner would definitely like she would appreciate like a little bit more like staying at home, but I'm not that kind of a person. But yeah, that was my start. In the IT in the IBM, it was a great experience working with the big banks and big clients. But after a couple of years, well. To be honest, like, and I probably never told anyone, but during those 2 years in IBM, I was like basically constantly trying to get into Google. Like Google at that time, I don't know how is it now for like loads of engineers out there, but at that time, like Google in the 2000s, end of 2000s was like, that's where you wanted to get. Like, these guys were doing amazing things. It was just brilliant. So I've tried to get there. How many times? Like, I think I had like 3 times or 4 times I was trying to get there, and I almost get there. I almost so I remember the first, that was the time in Google when they were doing 8 or 9 rounds of the interviews. Which was insane. I still remember that it was actually before the IBM. That's when I had these interviews. So when I had that like summer job in that insurance company, I was having every week interview with someone over the phone, like talking about like, how you fix stuff, like if the internet doesn't work, what are you going to check first, and all this kind of stuff. So there was that first time I was trying to, and I failed on the first time. I even flew to like Google headquarters in Europe, to Dublin, and I had interviews in there, but it just didn't work out. But it's me. Like, I was sort of kind of like, you know what, it's great. Like, I've made it to the last round. They gave me a flight ticket to fly to freaking Dublin. I was in the Google offices. They didn't hire me. It sucks. But like, next time, maybe it's going to work out. So I applied again and again. And I think when it was like 3rd time or 4th time, they said, we're going to hire you. And I still hold that message. The way I applied for the job when I was that first round, the way I applied it was over Twitter. Like basically the recruiter, he saw me on Twitter. I tweet something, and he pinged me a message. He was like, "Do you wanna like try to apply for this job?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess. It's a network engineering job, so I guess I would." And he was like, "Yeah, so let's do it. Let's go for it." So that was the start. So then I got hired to Google. So I've been working in Google for quite short amount of time. To be fair, it was like the shortest stay. How to say it? Like, it was great experience, but it was a little bit disappointing for me.
Oh, really?
Okay. I was expecting more. I just didn't feel like, I was. It was like my fault. It was me. It wasn't them. I just didn't feel like, I'm growing there and I'm moving anywhere. So we sort of like decided, I will move on, and I just wanted to find something more exciting. So when I was working in Google, I was working in Frankfurt in Germany. So I always wanted to go to London and work in London. So I just hop on a plane and apply for a few jobs in London. And I moved to London. Funny thing about my first stage in London was that when I arrived in here from Frankfurt for a day, I had set up 2 interviews. In the morning, it was interview with Natilik. And in the afternoon, it was a company called CACI. I didn't accept both offered me the job. I didn't accept the offer from Natilik, and I accepted the offer from CACI. So I was working for 2 years in CACI. And which was I think very different VAR than I was working previously in IBM. I didn't like that kind of a VAR. It was very sort of the reselling the resources. So like you were deployed on some like client side, and you've been just like resource they were paying for. It wasn't like a project work. It was more of the like build material. That's what it was. So I've been there for 2 years. Great experience. I think I learned a lot. It was like working for BT, Vodafone, Sky, etc. And then, which I didn't mention. When I joined CACI, my manager was some guy called Ian Anderson, and he hired me to CACI. And Ian was like, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be great. You have to join us. And I was like, okay, I'm going to join your team. And I joined, and 2 weeks later, he left.
It's gonna be great, but I'm out of here.
Exactly. And he left to
Yeah.
Natilik.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, fucking hell. Like, I declined the offer in Natilik. I accept the offer in CACI, and he left. Like,
right.
it wasn't maybe like
Yeah.
2 weeks, maybe it was like 2 months, but it was like, very
Right.
short period of time. I remember I was still in
Right.
the probation period when he left.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, yeah, Ian, thank you, but not thank you.
Right.
So then he was like trying to poach me for next 2 years. And I was
Sure.
always saying, like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, I follow you
You're
once.
gonna leave again.
Exactly, I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave again. I'm not doing it. And after like 2 years of like, going for beers and trying to convince me to join them, like, I accepted, and I joined Natilik, and it was probably the best decision in my career, like, ever.
Yeah.
Like, Natilik is definitely my longest like stay in any company. It's almost 5 years. Like, I would never ever think like I can stay in a company for 5 years. It's just too long, but it's great.
I look at the so it's 4 years and 9 months according to LinkedIn, but it's 5 years. But it's kind of funny how you mentioned there are great companies out there like Google or Amazon, Facebook, or Microsoft. Like, they're great companies out there, but they may not for you, right? It's more important about the position. It's about your personal career growth, and also it's about the team that you're working with. I've always wondered about Google as well. And I remember the interview process was really, really intense. And they kind of had their nose up, didn't they? I mean, I remember even after they said, okay, we're going to give you an offer, but every single offer goes through Sergey Brin's desk. Like, I don't know. Like, are you serious? No, it must be for you too. I don't know if the recruiter told you, but they were like, this is how it's going to be. And I'm like, well, Sergey, as busy as of a guy he is, do you think he has like the time for this?
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, this is how we do it. We're Googlers, right? We're Googlers. And so, like, pumping the chest. And then so a week and a half later, they offer. So, but I didn't end up going, but it's just kind of intense. And then after I declined the offer, I think they almost felt offended. Like, we're Google, how dare you,
Not
declining
accepting.
our offer?
Yeah.
But it's just kind of funny that how it worked out, and I'm glad you were confident enough in your own knowledge of yourself to say, well, it's a great company, and I enjoy all the free drinks and the the juice bars and the massages and
to be fair,
I
didn't like I always appreciate it, like having these kind of like snack bars and stuff, but you can't imagine how big relief it was for me not being around like snack bars and all this stuff, because you just can't help yourself, right? Like, you're just like always walking around just eating that like sweet. I was like, when I left, I was kind of like, I'm glad I'm not gonna have to like walk around it and just like trying to resist. Well, we sort of like a little bit have it in Natilik now, but like not in such a scale. So it was great. Like, I don't want to complain about the Google. It was just it was a great experience, and it was almost like being in your late 20s and you're like, okay, so I achieved where I always wanted to do. Like, I've made it to Google. And I want to leave. So what am I going to do now? Like, what is that like next big thing I want to do with my career? And it's like weird to like asking these kind of questions when you're like at the end of your 20s. It's kind of like I'm just like 29.
It's not just the time, right? It's the amount of experience that you've had, and but again, I think it's important to point out that it's more important about your own career growth. And I mean, yes, there may be more opportunities to grow at big companies, but you also need to find where your passion is. And just from what you've told me so far, it's like, you've done so much that you're aware of these kind of stuff. But for somebody who may not have done as much, or who may not have experience or had as much exposure, they may be like, okay, what if I give up this great opportunity, or give up seniorities, or but no, it's great to hear that story about how you decided that it's not for you, and then you went to, you go pursue some other path, and now that you've ended up at Natilik, which is what I would consider a high profile bar, but can you just tell us a little bit about now you got there, and what do you like? What do you guys do? And it's been 5 years. You must have had several different transitions and interesting projects. So tell us a little bit about working for a VAR such as Natalie.
Yeah, sure. So so we have the offices in London, in Sydney, and in New York. So we're a global company. We have this sort of the motto or mission, which is confident guide, which says a lot. I think it's like sort of like embedded in everything what we're doing and how we are thinking. It's like, every single day I'm not hearing someone or me mentioning like, the confident guide bit. What it means is basically we're trying to be different VAR. I'm not saying like, they're good and bad VARs. Well, they are. There are out there. There are.
I would agree. Yes.
Yeah, there are, but like not. Sure.
So they're good and bad VARs.
Yeah, the good and bad wars. So like there are obviously like good and bad wars in the UK and in Europe in general. Right. And there are like VARs who are doing things the way which fits to their clients. So like there are VARs who are like purely transactional, which is fine. For some companies it works because they have highly skilled people. And they just need to buy like cheap hardware or like services or software from someone because that's how the vendors nowadays works. Like you can't really proceed the licenses and stuff like directly. You need like partner for this. So which is fine, but that's not what we're trying to do. When I joined, our focus was on the small and medium-sized companies in the UK, headquartered in the UK. So, it didn't have to be necessarily, we would be targeting everyone from the UK, but at least they, based in the UK. And that sort of like grew into like focusing on the larger companies nowadays. But back to where we were, like when I joined Natilik almost 5 years ago, we were still like heavily collaboration company. So we had this strong like Cisco relationship, and we were doing loads of collaboration in contact centers, but we didn't really have any enterprise or data center practice at that time. If I remember right, like there was just me, Ian, who was my manager, one architect, and I think 2 engineers or 1 engineer. I can't recall now. Yeah, so like very small team, and we starting to building that practice. So what I've been asked is to focus on the strategy, like what we should be doing in the enterprise and the data centers. And at that time, it was like massive task for me. Like I was kind of like Ian, why do you want me to do it? Like like I was an engineer, I was like doing like all this architecture. Like, do you think I'm the right guy for this? And he always insisted I am. So what he was basically trying to do is like being focused on like people management and the numbers. And I was always like out there and trying to like, find the new vendors and new like cool stuff and helping us grow in terms of the enterprise and the data centers. And the reason for that was that we wanted to be that better partner to our clients. We wanted to really add that value to like what we're doing, what we're delivering. So it wasn't just about preceding the hardware, but it was also loads of services which we wanted to provide. For instance, like deploying the data centers and stuff. It was always very, very important for us to add the value to it. So that was something which we were always trying to do, and then like adding the new services. So we added like managed service on top of it. So that's where we like focusing right now. How we can add the value and like how we can innovate in the managed services fields. And the 24/7 support 365 for all of our clients. So that's what we like. For us, it's important that relationship. Yeah, like we want to make sure that the relationship with the client works and it's strong. And there has been many occasions which I've seen in those 5 years where we've been, for instance, get some leads from like, Cisco or from other clients to help like, this kind of a client. And it was apparent from the first meeting where the client said like, we're not interested in like, guys, like, giving us any advices. We just want to have these kind of like, quite loads of hardware. So it would be loads of money for us. And we said, no, this is not going to work. This is not what we want to do, even though obviously we're like, we're saying we don't want that money which are on the table. We don't want that, which kind of, especially in the city, sounds kind of stupid. But, it's what we did. And I think, there was sort of like, great example about us doing things a little bit more differently. For us was always more important to having that long-term relationship. So we knew that if there, we have loads of clients where we really started with them, like, they were small, they were almost size of our size. So at that time when I joined, we were like 50 people or something like that. And now, like, for instance, one of our clients, they work in R&D. They started maybe when we started working with them, they were maybe like 100 people. Now they are globally like thousands of people, so they went like through massive growth, and you are still keeping this like strong like relationship with them, and you're like sort of on this journey with them. And that's what I really do like about Natilik. Like, you're staying in a good and bad with your clients. And you help them to grow. You're like, facing the challenges together. And maybe you're not going to make too much money, like on the first sort of session and first project with them. But if you choose the right, clients, and they are built, they build a strong relationship with you, they will definitely spend, overall, like way more money than if you would do this kind of like a one-off, deal with some like large bank or large financial company. So that's what we do. That's what we're trying to do differently.
That's very interesting. So you're redefining, so it's value added reseller, but you're trying to redefine what that value is. So some people put that value as being, dollars and cents, but it sounded like you guys were trying to put the value more in the relationship, the long-term growth, picking the right client, as you mentioned, right? Like people who want to grow with you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's what we're, for instance, doing, just to give you an example, like, we are like, for instance, doing regular strategic meetings with our clients. Like, we're sitting in the room with a client, with their team of like architects and CTOs, et cetera, and just discussing, their strategy. They're open, they're sort of kind of like sharing their plans for, let's say, next financial year. And they want us to provide them the inputs, like, how do you think this is going to work, and do you think we should do something like differently? And, many times they don't listen to us, which is fine. But, like that's sort of the opportunity, like, we're in the room with them, and they like, at least like, they want to listen to us. That's that's a big sort of, that's a big thing, for me personally, definitely. And it's something which I didn't see a lot. With the different VARs I've been working before, and I don't think like it's very common, like from what I hear from other people in different companies here in the UK, is definitely not something which is standard for these companies as well.
So I'm sure they would take your input. They may or may not, because they have other considerations and all that, but they may or may not follow it. But they definitely value you guys' input. So so it sounded like you pivoted and yourself, going from collaboration to data center and branching into other areas. So how do you prepare yourself, besides always constantly learning, how do you prepare yourself to work for a VAR, for example? I'm sure it's different than, having your own business or being a ski instructor or working for Google, right? So what's unique about working for a VAR such as Natilik or VAR in general?
So, so for my specific position, being a principal architect or being the architect, is like our architects should be with the engineering background.
Okay.
So like, we want people with the technical background. So me personally, I don't think it's a great start for your career, being the solution architect. I think you should have some sort of, knowledge and experience, even though, like, we have the one exception. We have the, like, guy who joined us, like, when he was like his early 20s. Great guy, like, really, like, hungry and like, funny. It's just great guy. And he moved, like, from this, like, system engineer role where he was, like, helping building bombs and doing, like, very junior work into, like, solution architect role quite recently. Right. So we're now, like, making sure he's really, like, he's upskilling and he's, like, really growing, and he does. So he's the exception. But in my opinion, solution architect, the key is to having some sort of the experience being an engineer. And I think, for us specifically in Natilik is the pre-sales skills. So
I see.
You have to be able to sell stuff. Like, like if you can't sell me yourself when we're doing interview, it's nothing personal, like, but like you're probably not, like, right for the job. Like, if you can't like communicate, if you can't, like, upsell yourself in front of me, it's not gonna probably work very well in front of the client. And we're like, we're London, so like in London, like you need to not being aggressive, not at all, but like, you need to be able to like sell yourself and sell Natilik. Because, like, if you can't sell yourself, you can't sell the Natilik, and if you can't sell the Natilik, you can't really sell any solutions, which we have. Or at least, like, not in Natilik, I think, I'm pretty sure that there are some bars we are basically approached by the client. This is what we want, and sell it to us. This is not how we work. We usually like, trying to explain the client, like, what are the benefits of these specific technologies. So I think, these kind of like your communication skills, sales skills, and the engineering skills are very important. That's why we can never find any solution architects. Like, we're just like too demanding. And we're just like, but like when we do, we have like, great solution architects. So like, the team we have now is just amazing. They're like great bunch of guys. They really, stick around, have each other's backs, and they're hungry as well. So like, they really want to learn the new stuff. So I'm always that like crazy guy who's like running around and trying to find the new cool stuff, and trying to like, make that buzz in the company. Like, when everyone like sleepy and they're like, yeah, this works. Like, we're doing Cisco and it works and we're selling it and we're making money and we're growing. And I'm trying to tell them like, no, this is not, we just can't like, stay still. We just have to like look for something new where we need to grow. So like, I appreciate these guys. They sort of like accept, this kind of a madness I'm bringing to the team and to the company. So it's a great, and I think like what specifically Ian Anderson did, I didn't do it, but Ian, as a people manager, just bring that sort of the like calmness, and he's the coach. Like he's the greatest coach I've ever seen. He's just able to build team of like different people, so it makes sense. I've never seen anything like that. Like he's basically like he's really like basketball or football coach who's like hiring like different people from around Europe, and he just feels like this guy will really fit in there. What do you think? So it's like and the leadership is just brilliant. They giving us the freedom, but it's probably like a different topic. I think like these kind of skills are, in my opinion, like very important. Being hungry, being able to sell yourself, and therefore like selling the products, and being technical.
Right. I mean, it's funny you mentioned. So you mentioned you study business at one point. And so that probably come in handy as far as speaking the same language, when somebody talking about, shareholder value, it's not a surprise to you versus some other engineer may be like, oh, what? So it's back to that funny story about, how do you sell me this pen, right? It's not a pen. It's a writing machine. It's an instrument that you sign your $1 million contract with, and it's how you express yourself to the world. So I mean, I'm sure all of us heard about that story, and I got the same bit of advice when I was transitioning from the pure engineering role into an SC role, because you're very much chasing that quota, and it's every quarter you have to have a strong heart. You have to be able to take rejections, like you said, right? Like you might be sitting with the client and they just kind of, brush you off. You've been preparing this presentation for weeks, but at the same time, this is what it's about. You do the best you can. You still try to. Yes, it's not all about the money, but money is super important too, right? It's what pays the bill, and it's what sustains the operation. Nobody said, you live to breathe, but without breathing, you can't really live. So it's almost like that. So you need money to sustain, but the purpose of your VAR is not to get money. And so I don't know. I don't even know if that makes sense, but
yeah,
I hear you.
No,
completely.
I think it does. I think it does. And, it's about the culture. Like, our CEO, what is he saying? I always love, when he's saying it. Culture eats strategy for the breakfast.
Nice.
And I always
like
it. Yeah. I think, somebody said it and he's using it as well. But it's it's a great saying and I really like it. And that's one important think about the Natilik, the culture. It's just, very important. And I think that made the whole difference about where we are. And what we're doing, and why we are so successful. I think, or I would hope so.
How would
successful.
you? No, you definitely are, right. Branch offices and a number of employees, different continents. But how would you? So obviously you've worked in various locations and you work with different VARs. How would you? What recommendation would you give someone who's looking into working for a VAR? So obviously you mentioned all the qualities, technical background, work from your ground up. Don't start as a solution architect, and learn your business skills. But how would you tell? Like, let's just say somebody in your shoe, like 5 years ago, you were interviewing, or maybe even a little bit longer, right? When you had interviewed for both VARs and you want to make a decision, knowing what you know now, what are the characteristics you would look for, or to avoid, making a detour to a quote unquote bad VAR?
Yeah. So for me, I think when I said there has been some bad VARs in my career, it was never that bad that I had to leave next month.
Sure.
I was staying in CACI, which wasn't an ideal VAR, but it was okay. It was okay work. I think what I didn't like personally, and maybe some people will like it, I don't know, was that sort of when they selling you as a resource, basically. That's I think what I much more prefer, and what we're trying to do, or what we're doing in general in Natilik, is that we are selling engineers as a part of the project. So they're doing the project work. So they're clear sort of the criteria, what you would be doing and what you will be delivering, and then you're done with the project and you're moving on. So that's for the engineering. For the pre-sales, I would be probably interested about where what we're doing, what is the mission, how are we trying to be different from the other VARs, because that's for me, it's it's quite important. If I will be joining a company who's just trying to be the average VAR, I will be average architect, or I will be average engineer, and you don't have really sort of the motivation to get better and to improve and to grow. So that's what I would check. Probably what is the mission of the VAR, and what are the relationships with the vendors. What I found out, loads of our clients really do like when we are bringing the vendors into the room, and we like it as well. What we don't like is when the conversation is driven by the vendors. We know vendors are important. Vendors are making all this great stuff and all these great technologies, but they are not neutral. And that's what we're trying to be in that room. We're trying to sit, between the vendor and the client, and creating some sort of a filter. And that goes into the relationship with the vendors. Our obviously main priority is the relationship with the clients, but also very important for us is to have that relationship with the vendors as well. So that's one of my responsibilities in Natilik, to make sure the vendors are happy and they understand what we're doing, where are we going, what is our strategy, Is it in line in what they're doing? And, if not, why is it so? Is it because we missing something? Like, we didn't get it? Or does it mean like, something is going on and this relationship doesn't work and you're looking for someone else? All these kind of things are important as well for the relationship, because if you have a good relationship with the vendor, you can fix loads of things. There will be always an issues like with the products you're selling, and closer relationship with the vendors you have, quicker you can solve them, or like less painful it is for the client, and less painful for the client means the client is more happy, and they want to stay with you. And it's also important for me, when I'm responsible for the strategy, in the whole group around the data centers and the DevOps, to understand when the vendor is going. It is essential. Like, if I want to look at the market, where is it going? I need to understand, where the vendors are going and what is going on in the whole industry. And if you don't have that relationship, obviously vendors not going to share anything. They will be kind of like, just go on the internet and just like read what we're doing, and that's it.
They send you a link.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have that relationship, they are much more open with you, and it just helps in so many ways. So I think for the VAR, like, it's almost the same important having the strong relationships with the vendors as with the clients. Yeah, one thing which I probably didn't say about Natilik is they're very picky about the vendors. We are not one of those vendors who's like, having hundreds of like partners, technology partners, and we're delivering, hundreds of different vendors. We are like, Cisco heavily focused, but since we're growing, like, we're adding new vendors on our way. But what we're trying to always do is that there is like minimum overlap with between the vendors.
Yeah.
Because that upset vendors. Like, if you suddenly like, go to other vendor, you're like, well, what are you doing, guys? Like, I thought we were friends, and it looks like we're not friends. So
back to that relationship thing.
Yeah, exactly. Back into that relationship, and you're like constantly talking to the vendors and explaining them, like, right now in the last 2 months, we're onboarding HashiCorp, which is like super exciting, like a great company and amazing. I'm really looking forward to work with them. And it was like, not like explaining, but like, we sort of like, I explained to Cisco and to Pure Storage, who we partner with, and other vendors which we have. I explained them sort of kind of like, look, this is why we're doing it. Or like the same thing was like, few years back with the VMware. Like Cisco was kind of like, why are you onboarding VMware? And we were like, hold on, like, it's not because like we're stopping selling Cisco. It is because we need like, some other areas fill in with their products, so there will be no overlap. So, and that's important because then these vendors understand and they accept it, and they're helpful as well. So I think the vendor relationships are important for the VAR. And if I would be joining any VAR, I would like to know like what is how the relationship works, and the trainings. Like, we are great in terms of training our people. Like, we're giving people like, time to study, etc. So I would probably check that before I would be joining. And then the career path. I think like, where am I going? Like, me personally in this company, like, where I can go, how far I can go, what will be my responsibility? Is it going to be growing in terms of where I will be responsible for this division of the company? That's what I would be interested as well.
Yeah, all of these are great points, right? Because nobody, especially when you're interviewing, you're at a disadvantage to begin with, right? The power balance is not in your favor. You're asking for a job, and they're there to give you an offer. The dynamic changes after you get the offer, but in the beginning, and when you're interviewing, nobody's going to tell you like we're all about billable hours, right? Like, and we have 1,000 partners that we have on the back end. Just look at our logo wall, right? But these are all great points that you could subjectively ask during your interview, and to kind of get a feeling of everything that you talked about. Nobody's going to say we don't care about our people, but if their budget for training was equivalent to lunch dollars, then it's probably a sign, and not a very good one. So I appreciate that. I think those are very important and valuable advices if for people either looking for a career change or just out of the uni and trying to get a job to begin with. So I appreciate that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about. I know we're running out of time, but it's such a fun conversation. But I want to talk to you about.
It's fine. We can overrun, so it's not a problem, mate.
Okay, great. So I want to talk to you about network automation. So I know you guys are huge on it. You've been speaking you've spoken at various conferences, on stages, and I think Yen is actually speaking at this year's DevNet Create. So what are your thoughts? What are your just visions, and how did you get to be such an early cheerleader for this thing that Cisco is doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I don't know, like, we're like, it's probably, with me, it started even before I joined Natilik. I was always into, like, because I've been working with the Linux a lot before, and I knew, like, about the automation before. And
right.
I remember I was playing with the Ansible and stuff pre-Natilik. But that company didn't really, appreciate it. I think we were just different kind of a company. They didn't look at it like I thought like we should be looking at it. But in Natilik, I think what has changed really that sort of the meeting with Stuart. Like I still remember it. Like when we met with Stu, it was in Amsterdam. It was in some like Cisco conference, which has been there, and we had a chat. And we were talking about like Ansible and the automation. And I didn't know too much at that time. Stuart definitely knew way more, and he still knows way more than I do. Yeah, he does. He's a smart ass.
Sure.
But Stuart, like we basically like it took off. Like we had that discussion in Amsterdam, and in the meantime, actually that was like when it started in Natilik. I think a few weeks later, me and one of my friends and the ex-colleagues from the previous company, Chilla, we've organized first network automation London meetup, which was sort of the like first event, this sort of the stuff in London,
right?
And we've done it in our Natilik offices, so we have still somewhere the pictures. It was like totally cramped of like people. I think it was like 60, 70 people. Like some people say, like since then, there was like never ever like more people than it was like on that night, and it was great. Like
and they're not there for the taco or anything like that. They were there for the talk.
Yeah, there was some other events. Like I remember, like we had a once like like homeless guy going into our office, just like pretending like he's an engineer. So we gave him some food. We didn't kick him out. We just like let him in there. He was like listening. Maybe he's an engineer now. I don't know. Maybe it inspired him.
You never know, right? Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Maybe it changed his life.
Right.
So like this first session was great, and Stuart has been in that session as well, and he really liked how it was in our office and what we've been doing and what we've been talking. At that time we didn't really do too much in Natilik. I was trying to sort of, I remember first project where I wanted sales and a pre-sales look at it like a little bit different, was project where we were deploying like Meraki for I think 200 sites globally or something. It was like one of the largest deals we've been doing at that time.
Yeah.
And I told them like, look, we can automate it. Like it has the APIs. I don't know how it works, but I guess like, we can make it work somehow. And, people had questions like, okay, so we're not going to be charging like, like multiplied by 150 sites. We can actually do it like, in less time. And I was telling them, yeah, we can do it. And that's when the automation started to taking off, all these kind of like events and projects. And then I think the biggest sort of the accelerator was the DevNet Express, which we organized in our office with Stuart and his team in London. And that was big. Like it wasn't big like the network automation meetup, This was big because we were able to invite, I don't know, like 50 clients or 40 clients into the office, and they were sitting with us for 2 days. And they just like really appreciated. We were giving lots of time to them to learn the new skills, and that's when it started. And I've been basically starting to from there, starting to explore like what we can do around the automation. So how we can leverage it, like in terms of the automation, like for deploying the projects.
Yeah.
So how we can speed up like deploying the projects, how we can like start offering it as a product, how we can help our clients with the automation. And one maybe like parallel line was also our CTO, Adam Bonney. So at that time, he was starting to like exploring like how we can leverage maybe Terraform internally.
Yeah.
So he started using Terraform. And it's just like all these things like starting to coming together. So, then there was like the DevNet Create where we've met.
Yep.
I've been talking in some like other conferences as well, and it had a really good traction. The beginnings were always kind of like more, I think, like marketingy. It helped us to raise the profile, to explain to clients like we're like more interesting partner with VAR than like the other VARs.
Sure.
So it more like helped from the marketing perspective, but
Sure.
I think it is starting to change in the last year or less than 2 years. Things are starting to changing that we are starting to really basically monetizing it. We're like really starting to selling the automation as a product. Either it's like services, or we have this kind of like Natilik infrastructure as a code as a product, which is built on the Terraform, and we're like providing loads of stuff around it, like modules, etc. So there's like loads of Natilik IP embedded in it, and we're delivering it to the clients. It's a loads of stuff we're doing now around the automation, and it's really like starting to picking up in the last year, where it's not just about the talking, but it's actually about like us delivering projects and delivering stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate the transparency, right? Like what you said before, it's like this I don't want to say hype curve, but there's certainly a growth curve, right? Initially, it was more about marketing, higher profile, differentiating yourself, but now it's gradually infiltrating into other parts of the company, and you're actually adding your own IP and making it more sticky as far as the value that you add to your client, but also goes back to what you were saying on your mission, that you guys had that trust relationship. And because your mission was always about longer term engagement, you're willing to front load the cost of hosting the event, front load the cost of going through the training, not knowing if that's going to pay off at the end. But if you look at it in a long run, that's going to pay off. And so just all of these kind of tie in together, where you're making an upfront investment, differentiating yourself. Now you're reaping the benefits of that deeper engagement. And I imagine your client would trust you more, and this worked out, and so that relationship is even deepened. So
yeah, exactly. That was a spot on, and I think that goes again into that culture thing in the company.
Yeah.
Like I've been basically given the freedom to like test stuff and try stuff, and that's what I've been doing with the automation. And there's been like some successes, some less successes. I think now we're starting to seeing first sort of the like fruits, which are like coming from these kind of like engagements, which at that time they could feel like they didn't really bring any money, but I think now they starting to like bringing first sort of the successes and first things into our business.
Yeah, that's great. I like everything that entails, and I think that's a good summarization of everything we talked about as far as your career, right? So I think, even though you didn't say it, but it always it goes back into kind of this growth mindset. You always believe something could be changed if you just put in enough time. You do your deliberate practice, like you're always stretching. Even though when you were at IBM, you're stretching to say, what about Google? What about some other areas that I may be interested in? So So that's awesome. And then, we'll bring it back into your experience at the VAR, your meta skill sets, your meta like communication, business skills, and all of that. So that's great. So, I feel like we could continue on for maybe another hour and a half, but unfortunately, I think our listeners' earbuds might hurt a little if we go on for another hour and a half. But I want to thank you for being on the show. But before we say goodbye, is there any if people want to look for you on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or any other social media, like what's the best way to kind of share your content? Where do you broadcast most of your message nowadays?
Probably LinkedIn, to be fair, but like I'm trying to minimize my sort of the social media sort of the time. So like I have a Twitter as well, which I'm I'm using from time to time. Sure. But I'm sort of like trying to minimize the time I'm using the social media. So like LinkedIn is great. I'm monitoring it. So if anyone would like to talk to me or get in touch with me, just add me on LinkedIn. Or on the Twitter, I'm monitoring the Twitter as well. So we can definitely chat in there. Or what am I using? Yeah, I'm to be fair, it's the Slack I'm using for talking to various people. Is the WebEx Teams, which I'm using internally. And it's the email. That's usually these three channels. I'm kind of like old school feel. I feel a little bit old school. I don't have too much against the social media and stuff. I just try to minimize it because it's just like a rabbit hole always. When you start looking for something, it's just going deeper and deeper and deeper, and you suddenly you're in it for an hour, and you're like, oh damn it! I could do something something better for 1 hour than just going down this feed.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you. So for me, I kind of cut down Facebook nowadays and just focus on LinkedIn and Twitter. But even then, it's it's like you said, it's a rabbit hole. But so we'll provide the links for those. But just keep in mind that may not checked often, but Matyas does keep up to date with those as to the best he could.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
Before we say goodbye, any call to action for young engineers who try to look for a job in VAR or network engineering or network automation? What any call to action?
I always say stay hungry. That's all I'm saying. You just don't sit at home and just do the Twitter and stuff. Just open the books, read some stuff, go on the internet, read some documentations. Just there's that's the beautiful thing. There's just right now, I think we're living in really exciting times in EIT. What is going on around the DevOps and the automation and stuff. I don't think that's something which will repeat itself in the next 10 years or 15 years. I think this is very unique time. So it's very exciting time to be alive and to be in the industry. So just be hungry, stay hungry, just learn as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's why we clicked so well, because that's actually what I engraved on my first ever iPod mini on the back. Is just what Steve Jobs quote, stay hungry, stay hungry. So
all right, I didn't even know he said it. I like Steve Jobs, but I didn't even say Steve Jobs actually said it.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's where I heard it from. So
right.
I'll attribute to him until we find out otherwise.
Yeah, definitely not. It's not something which I probably heard it somewhere as well. I like it. Sometimes I'm hungry literally. Most of the time I'm hungry literally, but I love to learn as well.
Yeah. So I think the full thing was stay hungry, stay foolish, and
right.
that may have been from his Stanford University commencement speech. But and I'll actually put a link down there. So if you haven't seen that, I think it's the only one. It could be one of the few or the only one that he's ever given. And if you read his biography by Sir Isaac, then you will probably know the backstory for that. But it's outside of the context. But I'll definitely put a link down and recommend it. And And you also heard it from Matyas about, bias reaction, stay hungry. So thanks.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Matyas. It's been such a pleasure. Ever since we met in person, 2019. I always grab any chance that I could to talk to you. So this provides a great excuse just to talk to you for another 90 minutes. So that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, as well. And great talk to you. And I hope we will see each other in person very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for listening to the Network Automation Nerds podcast today. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms. Until next time, bye-bye.